I am Laura McGee. I'm your host this evening, and this is the Carlsbad hub of Vesta Divorce. I'm a divorce mediator and a divorce coach, and I'm also a co-parenting specialist. I'm located in the village of Carlsbad, and I work with clients anywhere in California. And so my focus when I'm speaking to any of you, it would be really about divorce in California in particular. The rest of my legal team, Kenneth Lee, you want to introduce yourself, and we'll do a round robin of everybody before we jump in.
Sure thing. Thank you, Laura, and thanks for everyone being with us this evening. As Laura said, my name is Ken. I'm the attorney in the hub, and my entire practice is dedicated to family law. So I deal with all things relating to a divorce from the time it may start, whether it's a petition or a response, and dealing with all the issues that come up in a divorce, child custody, visitation, support issues, dividing assets and debts. And I also deal with many post-divorce issues if, for example, if support or visitation have to be adjusted and modified afterwards. So thanks for joining us. We're looking forward to sharing some wisdom with you tonight. And with that, I'll pass it along to, I believe, our real estate team.
Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer Cheney. I am the realtor in the hub, and I've been in the business for 20 years. I went through my own divorce quite a while ago and did not have this type of community when I went through my own divorce. So these are the people that can really help you from A to Z. And I wish I had this community back then. And now I specialize in divorce transactions. So welcome.
Hi, everybody. I am Zach. I'm the lender in the hub. I have 30 years experience in the business. My primary focus is California, but Cross Country Mortgage, which is the platform that I work with, is approved in every state, so I can help people in all states. The primary focus of my skill set is to help people figure out early in the process if they can afford to buy out their spouse can afford to buy out them, and quickly determine, if you do need to sell and you're going to get your proceeds, what does a new purchase look like compared to renting? And this is all has to do with just strategies on how to help you manage your cost. With that, I will pass it on to Cinda.
Thanks, Zach. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope to give you the information that will help you along your way. I'm the divorce financial analyst, and I help people gather their information, look at different settlement alternatives, and coordinate the reporting and analysis with your mediator or your attorney. And thanks for joining us.
All right, excellent. Thank you. All right, so this is your whole team. Ken and I are going to speak first. We're going to talk about some of the legal choices that you make and how they can really impact not only the conflict, but the cost of your divorce. So Ken, we are going to jump in here first. And I think our first topic we want to discuss is what are some of the process options that clients should know about, especially as they're just contemplating divorce?
Well, I guess if you're talking about different pathways to getting it done, really the biggest two pathways are either through mediation or through litigation. Mediation would be done through someone like Laura, who is a professional divorce mediator and who would act as a neutral to assist the parties in, basically educating the parties as to the whole process and understanding how it works and helping guide them to a negotiated settlement. That is obviously much more cost effective than the other path, which is the path that I am essentially involved in most of the time, and that is through litigation. That's where instead of negotiating things with the assistance of a mediator, everything is litigated. Everything is brought before a judge. All the issues are decided by a judge. And obviously that involves a lot of preparation before you even go into court, and then appearing in court, litigating in court in front of a judge, and getting orders from the judge. So those are the two main avenues. There are other, I guess we'll call them hybrid methods. One being if each party has their own attorney and they're not going to court, they're not mediating, but they are able to be amicable and reasonable enough that the attorneys can, through negotiating with their clients, consulting with their clients, can work together to reaching a settled agreement without going to court. And one final aspect here that should be aware of is in the mediated setting, attorneys such as myself can serve a consulting role. where even though I am not appearing at the mediation, I'm not going to put our firm name on any of the pleadings. I can consult with one of the parties who's in mediation, and they can bounce ideas and proposals off of me, and we can assess them together. And that can be very helpful because a mediator like Laura, they have to maintain their neutrality. So they can't say, hey, wife, I think maybe you might want to push back a bit on that, or husband, I think you could get something better on this. Or if you ask, either party asks, if is this a good deal for me, they can't give you advice. But a consulting attorney such as myself in that role can give you unvarnished advice in your best interest. So that's kind of an overview of the different avenues to getting a divorce completed.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And so one of the things I would like to suggest to all of you, especially if you're still choosing the pathway you're going to use, is think of this kind of like a doctor would. You go and see your doctor and you have a headache, you don't start with the brain surgeon. So, right? So it's easier to triage up, meaning I'm going to try mediation. If it fails, everything in mediation is confidential. So you're going, and potentially you might even resolve some of the issues, but only have to litigate one issue. Ken had a case where the date of separation was very divergent, so they were able to reduce it to a single issue, and you can still come back to mediation. So the assessment process, so often when you're maybe you come to the decision you're going to divorce, or you more likely are rattled by the decision of your partner who says they want to divorce and you're not feeling equipped, I think the customary wisdom is you better get a lawyer, you're going to get screwed, pardon my French, and you better lawyer up, and it's all this flurry and chaos. The reality is every divorce ends in a divorce. The biggest difference is whether you still have a home and assets to divide, or you bled them off fighting for your own money. We have a community property state in California, and the process of mediation still does stick with the law. We don't ignore it. We don't throw it out the window. But you can asset swap. You can do different things. You can delay a sale of the home. You can co-parent inside the main home called nesting. You can do so many things because the mediator has the opportunity, based on all the other experts you're going to work with, to help you evaluate what are your best options as a family? What's going to work for you? And you get to think like parents instead of like a judge who has all kinds of limitations. So start with a diagnostic, okay? And if one fails, you can level up. So the most extreme, hire the lawyers, like Ken says, just run for orders to the court. The most peaceful, most cost efficient is mediating. In between, there's collaborative mediation where you might bring your attorneys into the room. There's lawyer-to-lawyer negotiations that each of these get more expensive, but some of them belong to certain kinds of cases. That's why a diagnostic, don't always assume that, the least expensive option is your cost-effective option. But the reality is what you really need to do is build a village. So I want you to listen to all the experts we have today, because information is going to be your superpower. If you are going into a mediation, you are negotiating. And you need help from someone like Ken as a consulting attorney saying, here's the parameters, let's keep it at least on the dartboard, not over there. Or somebody like Cinda, who's a certified divorce financial analyst, who can tell you, if you swap this for this, they're not equal. So think about your proposal. Or talk to someone like Zach and think, I'm going to buy the house out, but you haven't got any information as to whether you qualify. Or maybe you don't even know what your house is worth. So you got to make sure you speak to someone like Jennifer, because you're arguing over an asset that is in motion with the market. So all of these are part of the preliminary steps. And if you have started the litigation process, what could you still do to make it a little bit more cost efficient, a little bit more time efficient, so that you can get out of the court's grasp and into settlement mode? What would you say, Kevin?
Well, for me, if you're in the world of litigation, I always tell people, just if you're going to go to court, just have a definite reason why. There should be a clear plan, a clear objective as to why you're doing that. So many times in my practice, I'll hear a client, or sometimes from opposing counsel, say, well, we're doing this because for the principle of it, or I got to teach the other side a lesson. Mm-hmm. Those are generally pretty bad reasons to be spending a ton of money on legal fees, because the legal process is expensive if you're going to litigate. There's a lot of preparation that goes into it, and in going to court. There's a lot of time that goes into litigating in front of a judge. And even after it's done, someone's got to prepare the order. It's just a never ending cycle of legal bills, quite frankly. So sometimes there are definitely reasons you have to go to court. I'm not saying just shy away and never do it. But if you're going to do it, make sure it's for a very specific reason and you know what you're trying to get out of it and it's for the right reasons. The other thing I would say too is if you're going to go to court, make sure you've mapped out and done as much homework as possible as far as how you're going to get to that objective. One of the classic examples I provide is because I've seen it sadly so many times is, for example, support, whether it's child support or spousal support, as you can imagine, pretty heavily litigated. But so many times, as I'm sitting there waiting for my case to be called, I'll see the other cases going, and you'll see litigants come before the judge, and whoever's brought the motion, for example, someone comes before the judge asking for their spousal support to be increased or child support to be increased. And what becomes painfully apparent many times is they haven't gone through the statutory calculations ahead of time to see if it will even be worth bringing such a motion. Because we're not going to get into the details here, but there are a lot of calculations and legal factors that go into determining those things. But there are ways to go through those things and analyze them before even bringing a motion to see if it's worth it. So I've seen it sadly many times where someone, for example, coming in asking for an increase in support hasn't done that homework, and they come away with not getting the increase or sometimes a decrease, the absolute opposite of what they were asking for because they didn't do the preparation ahead of time. So that's the other thing I would say is definitely do your homework ahead of time and have a good idea of how it can possibly turn out before just willy-nilly running to court and filing a motion.
Right. And Ken is saying homework. Well, you still have to do homework when you're mediating. And I tell my clients, divorce is not something that happens to you. You must be an active participant. So a really good cost-saving key is to fully engage. Those who just put their head in the sand and tell their attorney, just tell me when it's over, we're not going to have a good experience. The attorney's actually not going to have a good experience. And even in mediation, I've had people come in and, you've needed extra sessions because one person is still resisting the process. They don't come prepared. They're so granular on a parent plan, they want to worry about the commas instead of the content or something. So,
Laura, I don't mean to cut you up, but your microphone is breaking up a little.
Thank you for telling me. Thank you for telling me. I am having some technical issues. I appreciate you saying
You're
that.
perfectly clear again.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. So, part of this process is ensuring that you are willing to fully engage. Do your homework, get organized, use a divorce coach if you need one to support your process, get a counselor or a therapist to help you with some of the emotional and grief process. Because if your brain's not clear, you're going to potentially regret the decisions you made later when you can't fix them, okay? So take your time. Cinda's going to talk a bit about that, fully engaged, and information is your superpower. Do not forget that concept. All right, we're just going to cover a couple more things before we send you over to the rest of our team. So I wanted to just comment about parenting. I can't say enough about the mediation process to support parenting. You can't parent twice. Get one opportunity to do this, and none of us are perfect at parenting, but trust me, dragging your children through a 2 or 3 year litigated divorce, you've lost those parenting years. You've probably done a lot of harm, potentially permanent. And you've really, by putting your children in the middle, meaning you've created this tug of war instead of the center. I'm like, think of them in the center and that you're going to build this moat around your children to protect them and keep them away from your divorce information. They don't want to know how much they're costing you. Guess what? You had children, they cost you. And before you were getting divorced, did you tell them like, oh my God, do you know how much I'm giving your mother to feed you every month? Yeah. So, really, take some time and get some support to ensure that you can give your children the ability to love both of you and to be in the most peaceful environment possible. And I'll throw one other piece in that. We were talking a little bit, a 1 to 2 home family. ever since our interest rates are so low, the homeowners are really stuck trying to figure out what to do. And Zach and Jennifer will speak to it. But a lot of couples I've worked with in the last year and a half in particular are wanting to figure out how to nest, we call it nesting or bird nesting, parent in the primary home while they transition and figure out their options. So when somebody doesn't run out and just lease that $5,000 a month house because they want a backyard for their dog and everything too, and blow their budget out, instead come and we can figure out boundaries and systems and buy you 3 to 6 months, 12, 18 months. What can you do as a family to find out a way, if it's safe, has to be a safe environment, to cohabitate and share that space, and then work on this whole process and find out what is our real post-divorce budget, because I have to fit my budget, my money into my budget into my money. People are like, well, I can't live on that, but unless you have a money tree, there's no more money. I have couples, they're sharing even 15,000 net dollars, and they're still both saying, I can't live on that. But I can't live on it is not how you get more money. You actually only get what's available in this program. So now you have to adjust what you're going to spend. So to me, which one's the cart, which one's the horse? Find out right away what your budget is, and that's going to require running these calculations. Ken and I have the same program the judges have, and then working with the experts to figure out, how do I make this work? Ken, you probably have some tips on that regard too.
Yeah, I mean, essentially just to endorse your approach, just to make the point about the contrast with litigation versus mediation. I mean, when it comes to support, especially the temporary support area, it's a very mechanical process. I mean, the judge is simply going to plug in the inputs that go into the program. They range from what's a timeshare for the children, or what's the incomes of the parties, and some other items such as interest deductions and such. Whatever you're stuck with, whatever the program says is what it's going to be, essentially. So that is a contrast with mediation, when you can actually agree and work with trying to rearrange those numbers and try to come up with something that may be more practical. The other issue Laura mentioned was the nesting option. That's not an option in litigation. When it comes to a divorce, there's a house and it's something that has to be divided. The judge has one tool, and that's the order that the house be listed and sold. So that's, again, quite a contrast between litigation versus mediation. And with regards to custody and visitation, a huge contrast between those two processes. I mean, Laura has described how you can get into the weeds about, the unique dynamics of your family and come up with a pretty in-depth parenting plan. If you ask a judge to come up with your parenting plan, it's very unsatisfying. I'll put it that way. The bottom line is someone's got to file a motion with the court asking for a judge to make those orders. The court's going to come back to you with 2 dates. Date number 1 is where you go meet along with many other people, wait in line, a court-appointed mediator for a short time, where you can ask the mediator to why you want a certain parenting plan. The mediator will take that into consideration, come up with their own report on what they recommend it to be. They turn that into the judge and to the parties. And your second date is when you show up in court for a 20-minute hearing, no testimony from parents or anybody. And the judge will say, what is it about this report you do or do not want? They'll listen to the reasons why. And then 20 minutes later, you have the parenting plan for how you're going to be interacting with your children. So keep that in mind, as you're making the decision on how to proceed. Again, sometimes you will have to litigate it. There's no way around it. But if you do have the option and people can be reasonable, mediation is definitely the way to go. And what I advise everyone, even though I'm a litigating attorney, give it a shot. Start with that. Like Laura said, you can always triage upward. But if you start and you ring that big bell of litigation right out the gate, it's hard to unring that and to ratchet back all the tension and the energy that goes into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just another point to what Ken's saying on the cost benefit aspect, what we know is couples who go to court to get the court to decide their custodial plan have very low compliance. And especially if they have young children, they're likely to return to court 2 to 5 times. So you didn't just hit that cost bell once. Whereas couples that do their parent plan and mediation, compliance is in the high 80s. And modifications are simple. Clients come back and see me for 1 or 2 hours and we update as needed. So your future costs are maybe $500 for a modification instead of $10,000 or more. So the cost choice, the path you choose in the beginning often discerns and determines how much you're going to end up spending on an argument on an ongoing basis, and an unsatisfying result when it comes to parenting. Parents like to have the choice about how they're going to parent. And when a judge tells them and they don't know their kids and they don't know your family dynamics, here's how parenting is going to go. It's not always sustainable, right, Ken?
That's true.
Yeah. Okay, so we got a big crowd here tonight and we got lots of information we want to share with you. Ken and I are going to put ourselves on mute off the camera, and we're going to send you over to our real estate team. And they are going to be talking about navigating real estate choices, all the strategies in this high mortgage interest rate and this tough housing market. There's, hear about like, what are the options? And also kind of what the part of some of these financial decisions you're making around the home, which is often a central issue, how it can affect your life after divorce as well. So take it away, Zach and Jennifer. So happy to have you here this evening.
All right. Hey guys. So Zach, are you around too? There's a lot to go over here. Hi, Zach.
Hey.
And here's what I want to first share with you. So normally, obviously, in especially in California, with the height of everything that happened in the last few years, your primary residence, if you have investment properties, but your real estate portfolio is one of your largest assets. And at the same time, it's one of the most emotionally charged parts of the divorce process. So those two, kind of battle with each other back and forth when you're dealing with your largest asset and the most emotionally charged. So the biggest thing I can share with you, and Laura mentioned this earlier, this is probably in every phase of information that you're gathering, but you need to slow down in this process. Because really where you want to be 3 to 5 years, from now, you have to actually look at that. And then we have to reverse engineer back to where you are today. Especially when it comes to being in the house, are you raising kids in it? We are obviously in a market with high interest rates and high prices. And what I see is a lot of people the more information you get, I think you'll get a full picture. But what happens is a lot of people go to a realtor almost after the fact. They think as a realtor or a mortgage lender, they think of us as, I only need them if I'm going to buy or if I'm going to sell. And in this process, it's one of the worst things that you can do. And I'm going to share with you some reasons of why you really need to connect with the real estate team kind of at the beginning, whether it's us or somebody else you choose. There's strategies that we can help you with. So one is you have to have a market value for your house. But in those costs, there's a lot that goes into it. There's deferred maintenance that you may have on your home that a lot of people don't even think about that in the cost of or the value of your home. If you want to buy out your ex and all of a sudden your roof needs to be redone in 3 years, there's all that goes into the buyout process. So you need that number ahead of time. And then, you need to know too, working with Zach or a lender on if you do decide to sell, what you can buy on the opposite end. And a lot of people are moving through this process so quickly, they're not slowing down and looking at all the numbers, strategizing about the numbers, and really trying to think about, again, where they want to be in the future. So that's kind of the overall picture. Zach, I'm going to bring you in too, because I think we can ping back and forth on some of these questions and strategies that we can discuss.
Sure.
So you go first on why it's important to bring you into just like a realtor side at the very beginning of this process.
Sure. And that, these are part of the strategies to manage your cost when it comes to the housing situation for you. Because there are 4 questions that I answer most frequently in combination with Jennifer. Number 1 is, where am I going to live? Right. Question number 2, where are my kids going to live? Question number 3 is, do I qualify to buy out my spouse? Or if we do have to sell, do I qualify for a new place comparing to renting it? And then the most important question that we work conjunction with Cinda Jones, the amazing CDFA on our hub, is regardless of qualifying, is what you're planning on doing going to fit your post-divorce budget, right, Jennifer? Because having gone through the process, that your budget post-divorce is way different than when you're sharing it with your spouse, right? So it's important to kind of get a handle on, what's my income and my expenses going to be potentially post-divorce. So those are the 4 questions. And then the first tip for managing the cost, just like Jennifer mentioned earlier, is you got to get in contact with someone like Jennifer and myself early in the process, making sure that you're working with professionals that understand the divorce process and that specialize in their field in divorce. Much of my business is divorce related, and contacting people early in the process. I noticed that on the poll, 90% of you are super early in the process, which is great, because if you can get this information early in the process, even sometimes before you file, before you even have your first mediation, maybe only one of you is thinking about doing it and you just want to know what the options are. It's never too early, right, Jennifer, to gather the facts. Because I'll just give you an example. I've had people, they're 6-7 months into it, they filed, they're mediating, and they never talked to a lender or a realtor to get a really good value on their home and to see if a buyout's even possible. And they could have just saved a ton of time and money in litigation and going back and forth between attorneys if they would have done that early in the process and just move right along to the process of selling the home.
Well, and vice versa on that too, Zach. What I see is a lot of people going into it thinking that they immediately want to buy out their ex. And so they start that way. And then what happens is they realize as they're kind of further along in the process, oh, shoot, I can't do that financially. And so they're already so far gone that they need to actually get it on the market and sell like immediately. And
Right.
that's not great either, because when you're trying to do that and everything's happening so quick, once again, you're not having a clear picture of the value of your home. And another thing that is important to connect with is, let's say, you do decide to, Laura mentioned it earlier, bird nesting. That's like staying in the home and kind of doing a co-parenting situation, and creating a plan for that. Well, because our market is changing, you need to connect with somebody to know every single month what's happening in your immediate area and how it's going to change those numbers and how they're going to fluctuate. Because you can say now, yes, we want to co-parent, but if the numbers are going to change very drastically for you, a month from now, 2 months from now, 4 months from now, it may change the conversation of when you sell. So you need to get your finger on the pulse, all the time, and not just go through with, I'm going to, buy out my ex, I'm going to stay there, and then be forced to sell so quickly that you're just getting, a market value price. But again, you're not taking into consideration any deferred maintenance. I always have my divorce clients do a home inspection right away so that they can go through and see what that deferred maintenance is. Because if you're buying out your ex at a high price right now, and you're choosing to stay in that home, but again, the roof needs to be redone in 3 years, and you're going to find that out, that's a cost that you are going to incur. And if you've stayed there for 10 years as a couple and shared that, then why would you want to fully take that on? So that changes the value of the home. So yeah, I think, backing it all up ahead of time and really just month by month having that number, whether it's from you, Zach, on what's happening with the interest rates, how it's going to change their buying, power, or just the value of your home. You need all that information on a monthly basis as you go forward.
Yeah, and it can be disappointing after you realize that, many times the spouse that is not the one that's been handling the finances. Sometimes it's divided up. Sometimes the spouse that wants to stay in the house isn't the one that's been paying the bills and may not be aware of, hey, my utility bill is $450 a month, if you don't have solar, obviously, we have a gigantic 1 acre lot and it's $500 a month for the gardener, right? So all those kinds of things have to be factored into your post-divorce budget before you make the decision on buying out your spouse. And then Laura mentioned early in the process that when I talk to somebody, let's just say that, you know, there's $500,000 in equity, and so you need to come up with $250 to buy out your spouse, right? In a super simplified version, that you can either have the option of trying to finance the whole amount to buy out your spouse. You can trade other assets and then not have to finance any of it, or sometimes it's a combination of the two that I see. And so you want to make sure that you give a call to somebody like me so we can figure out, you know, number one, is a home equity line appropriate? If you have a low rate first mortgage, will the refinance work better for you? Will your spouse agree to stay on the loan for X period of time if the exiting spouse is the one that is on the mortgage with you? You know, and just you need to get all of that information dialed in. So question for you, Jennifer, have you heard of the process called a divorce assumption?
Yeah. Okay, this is what's so funny. I was just going to ask you a question.
Okay.
And I just had this come up yesterday, and it's a question that I'm sure everyone wants to know, and that is the assumption of loan. And so that's really funny. So yes, you can go through that.
Okay, so you know, just about everybody that I talk to is like, how can I keep my 2.5% mortgage? And there's really a couple different ways to do that. You know, number one is if you don't need to finance anything and you're going to take half of your investments and give them to your exiting spouse in exchange for the house, you don't need to finance any of it, right? So if the exiting spouse is on the mortgage, there's obviously and you want to keep that low rate mortgage, there is a process that some loan servicers offer called a divorce assumption. So don't call the loan officer that did your loan. You want to look on your mortgage statement and call whoever is servicing the loan. And servicing means who is collecting your payments on a month-to-month basis. On the back or on the bottom or somewhere online, they'll have a phone number, and you're going to call. And don't get frustrated because, you know, the people that you get sent to are usually clerical entry-level people. So be patient with them. And they might not even know what the heck you're talking about. So you might have to keep asking, hey, I've heard about this divorce assumption process. Get to the right person and find out, is there a way for me to have my spouse that's exiting removed from the loan without having to do a refinance and go to a higher interest rate? A couple things to remember is that not all loan servicers offer this. So you want to, you know, get them to send you the process so you can see how much they charge, what's the process, how long it will take. Number two, no matter what, you're going to need to, in the divorce process, have your exiting spouse who is on the mortgage with you give you a timeline that they will agree to stay on the mortgage, because you can't apply for a divorce assumption until you are divorced, right? So that means that your marital settlement agreement has been signed, it's been sent down to the court, and it's been stamped and what's called in California conformed. And so you are taking title as an unmarried person. You can't even apply until that has all happened. So it's kind of a catch-22. It's like, well, how do I know if I can, you know, qualify for this? Because remember, you do have to qualify. It's not just an automatic assumption. They're going to do the qualifying with your income and your job and your debts and whatnot. So if you now have support payments, that's going to be factored in, right, to the qualifying. Remember that you have only your income and not your spouse's anymore. So where you qualified easily jointly when you bought the house, the divorce assumption, I'm not seeing too many of them get done right now. In fact, I told Laura, I haven't got confirmation from anybody getting it done in the last year and a half, even though I know the process is out there. So you just need to make sure that you know that it's available, get the costs, find out how long it's going to take. And then if you do talk to an experienced lender like myself, the qualifying would be the same for the assumption than it would be if you did a buyout and got a new loan. So I can, you know, run through quickly on what I think, you know, based off of, you know, what do you think your support's going to be, and, you know, what's your job and whatnot, and see if I think that 6 months down the line when they apply that it would be possible. So again, you have to get time, no matter what, you have to give timeline. You have to give your spouse time if you're the one exiting to get you off the mortgage. So there's something in the marital settlement agreement, you're going to have to agree to stay on that mortgage for X period of time, right? So that this can be a process that's possible.
Yeah, this is why it's so important too. This kind of shows a true example of why I tell people all the time, you need to have, you know, a hub of people or a team, a divorce team, because a lot of times we're all working together. I'm working with Laura, I'm working with Zach. We're all working together on the pieces of the puzzle because it is fluid. This is a fluid process. It's changing all the time. But yeah, the primary home is one of the most important things. So Zach, I have a question for you because this comes up a lot. I have a lot of clients that are stay-at-home moms, and, you know, they would love to, you know, buy out the home. Obviously, I'm not going to get into the weeds with how that's all, you know, divided, but what do you see on your end as far as qualification that they really need to be looking at in order to either move on and buy a new home or stay?
That is a great question. And like you said, it's very common that it is the spouse that maybe had lesser income or was the primary caretaker of the kids, right? That is the one that's going to be staying in the house. So, or trying to stay in the house, keep the kids in the same school, right? In the same neighborhood and whatnot. And, you know, and again, I always say for X period of time, you know, maybe until they're out of high school or whatever. So that the challenges are that remaining spouse, I call them, that is trying to stay in the house, if they have been working part-time or, you know, primarily working with the kids, then it's hard to qualify, right? Because they have part-time income, or if they've gone back to work, maybe they've only been on the job 6 months or whatnot, right? They go back to rebuild their education to be able to go back to work. So there are some challenges there. A couple of things to remember is that if you are the spouse that's receiving the support, you're going to want to write this down. There's a couple of things that need to happen in order to have that income usable for qualifying. Number one is that you have to prove that you've received it with most loan programs, 6 months seasoning, right? So, and it has to be going into your own account. So Jennifer, you and I are married, right? And you've been the primary earner, and now I'm the one getting the support. And you have the Chase checkbook, I have the US Bank checkbook, and you're just transferring money from one joint account to the other and saying, well, hey, that's the support. Well, that's just transferring money. Two married people or unmarried people are transferring money into joint accounts. So you got to open up your own bank account and start getting that money into your own account and have it be steady, consistent in the same amounts. So if we have kids that are playing club soccer and, you know, the support's $5,000, and you tell me, hey, I'm only going to send you $4,000 because it's $2,000 and you owe me $1,000, right? Then I'm going back to try to reconstruct this consistent history of income, and it's all over the place. So it's better to take the income and then just I would Venmo you back, you know, for my share of whatever I owe, of whatever those co-parenting expenses are. And then the other thing is that the income needs to continue for at least 3 years. So, you know, I just had one last month where there's twins that are turning 16. You know, so it's a large amount of the income, and unfortunately it's going to run out, even though this particular person was thinking that it was income they were going to have in their budget. Can't use it for qualifying because it runs out in, you know, 2.5 years. I've also had twins who are 13. So we can qualify the person, right? There's plenty of support there. It's going to continue for at least 3 years. But guess what? In 3.5 years, it's done. So even though they qualify, you know, I always ask the question, what are you going to do between now and then when this $2,500 or $3,000 or whatever it is goes away? How are you going to replace that income? Because even though we can qualify you, you know, you have to think ahead to what your situation is going to be post-divorce. Are you going back to school in order to get your teaching credential back so that you can go back to work full time? Because otherwise you're just setting yourself up in 3.5 years to have to sell the house, right?
I see that a lot. That's the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. So the last solution, if that spouse that's remaining just doesn't have any options to qualify, we have had parents and brothers and sisters come in and help them co-sign in order to get them to stay in the house for X period of time. It's not ideal, but we've done that, you know, quite a bit in the last 2-3 years. in order to help them do it. Because it's so important for, if both spouses are in agreement, keep the kids in the same school, same neighborhood, then that is a potential solution for a parent to come in. So.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's great. So to sum up the real estate end, it's emotionally charged. Know your numbers monthly, connect with the real estate team, lender, and realtor ahead of time so that you really can keep your finger on the pulse. So
Hey,
hopefully
before we turn it back to Laura, talk about a CMA, comparative market analysis.
Okay.
Huge cost savings compared to getting an appraisal. So I'll let you finish up by talking about that, and then we'll give it back to Laura.
Yeah, super quick, since I know we're running out of time, but CMA, comparative market analysis, very different than an appraisal. A CMA comes from a realtor, but it also takes into account the buyer market demand right now, along with, I can do the deferred maintenance. I have other pieces of information that I can put into play of that CMA. An appraisal is a third party, opinion of value. And a lot of times they're not taking in the buyer demand, what the market is doing. It's usually lower. So it kind of depends on, where you need the numbers to fall. But a CMA is usually going to give you the highest value for your home, along with everything that you need to think about in the future. Again, deferred maintenance, taking all that into consideration. If you're selling now, if you're selling later, all of that.
Well, the cost of an appraisal can be $600 to $1,000 depending on the value of the property. So if you get a CMA,
for a realtor,
there's some cost savings right there, and it's probably more accurate. So
I will say realtors are a dime a dozen. So I'm not just saying this because, it's me, but a CMA is also a third party opinion from a realtor. So you want to make sure that it is a seasoned realtor, somebody that knows what they're doing, and they're not
in
just
that area.
a number. Yeah.
Great. Good job, Jennifer.
Yeah, great tips. I wanted to layer a piece on what you're both sharing because it's so important. Everything you're saying could probably only happen if in a mediated context. Because if you want to delay the sale, if you want to stay on a mortgage, if you want to have time for an assumption, basically all that has to be negotiated. This is not something Ken could run to court and ask the judge to do.
No.
So if you want the creative use of your home and to get the most money out and be in charge of the timing of the sale or the use of the home, mediation is actually not really your only option, but on top of that, a mediator who's then skilled at supporting options. Because I also work as a coach, and sometimes I see people coming, well, basically we got the CMA, we talked to the realtor, to the lender, I guess we're selling the home. Because they don't know to explore all the other pieces that are possible. So just a hint for you, it's like when you pick your hairdresser, just because they got a license doesn't mean they're all the same. So,
Right.
when you pick your mediator, you got to interview them for what you're trying to accomplish and ask them what their strategies and who their team are, because this whole team is critical. So thanks for that piece. It's such a huge piece of what everybody's grappling with.
Hey, Laura, your microphone's a little rough again.
Darn. Okay. And thanks for telling me. We're going to bring Cinda on. Cinda is a divorce financial analyst. She's also got quite a range of skills long-term in this practice. And she's going to give you some strategies for planning, what if you're trying to swap assets? How do you evaluate them? What about taxes? One of the questions we've been having this evening is if one spouse takes something and someone takes another, are there taxes? This is when I say information is your superpower, this is the kind of stuff that most of us doesn't roll off our tongue. We need an expert like Cinda. So take it away, Cinda.
Thank you. And thank you all. Such a wealth of information. I think sometimes when people come to these presentations, they're seeking specific information. So you can always put that in the chat, and we'll certainly try to answer that. And we all have a commitment through Vesta to provide a free consultation. So if you want to call any of us, we'd be happy to help you in that way as well. I do the financial analysis and help people gather information. What I would say to save money is to start gathering information, but don't make deals and don't make promises. because as this progresses, you will learn more, and there's a lot to digest sometimes. And so people need sometimes to take a pause. They can be angry with each other or maybe with themselves, but it's important to gather all the information because you're going to be filling out declarations. And the way to save money and to get through this as expeditiously and smoothly as possible is to gather statements, bank statements, investment statements, write a chronology of the house. I was talking to someone just yesterday, and just casual conversation. I said, okay, we're going to have to get information about the house, and could you write a chronology, and how many houses did you own, and what were the mortgages? And he said, well, you know, the first house we bought, I used my 401k money. That was separate money because he had that money before he was married. So I said, we'll see if you can get that information. And the escrow documents. People are often feel flooded with anxiety about the information that needs to be gathered. Sometimes they'll push against it because they'll say, well, why should we do that? We both know what we have. But you're under a court process. And so you do need to gather sometimes extensive information. Sometimes it's simple, but it always bears careful scrutiny. I'll give you an example. An insurance policy. I had a couple that I think the wife was 68, the husband was 72. She said, oh, we don't need to worry about that. I'm going to get $1 million when he dies. But that's not the way insurance policies work. Sometimes the premium goes up. So when I took a look at it, the cost of the premium was going to quadruple, and they didn't know that. So that made a big difference in what their planning was and what their settlement agreement was. So there are pieces of information that really need to be addressed, found out, scrutinized. So again, don't make deals, don't make promises, because when people do that, then as they go down the road and they find out something they didn't know before, then they'll say, well, I'm not going to do that. And why would I do that? So then the turmoil starts, because then the discussion has to start all over again on a new wheel. And to go back to what Zach was saying, and Jennifer, you want to do a net cash flow analysis. You want to know all the sources of income. You want to have a good idea of what your living expenses can be. And then you can decide if you can keep the house or who can keep the house. What are your trading chips? Because when people have assets, they can, for instance, give up a retirement account or take part of a retirement account and negotiate the equity in the house. And there may be separate property that was put into the house in terms of repairs. So there's a lot to know, and it can feel overwhelming. Every person who goes through divorce is really going through 3 divorces at the same time. There's a legal part of it, which most of us don't interface with at all in our regular lives. And there's the emotional side of it and the financial side of it. And all of those things can be complicated and need to be addressed. It's really hard, especially at the beginning, because you can feel flooded and overwhelmed. The front part of our brain just goes tilt, and we sometimes don't make good decisions. So that's another reason not to hurry. Sometimes things have to be decided pretty quickly. You know, if there's who's going to pay the mortgage, and what about the utilities, and how are we going to share the kids? But if you can pace it off and make sound decisions, then your decisions are more likely to last, and you're going to be able to get to the other side of it in a way that you can go forward. The biggest regret people have sometimes is being angry with themselves because they didn't know and they didn't understand and they didn't take the time. So that's really worse than being angry at your former spouse. So I suggest people do a chronology, because that brings to light sometimes information that you might not have ever thought about it. But if your mediator, your attorney, the financial person is looking at that, then that could be a trigger to ask a question. that could be important to the settlement. If there's been an inheritance, what about benefits? What about different things that have been happening maybe with somebody's business? Because if someone is a business owner or they own several properties, there's a lot of information to gather, to be known, and to be understood. What we often see in divorce is the conversation around financial matters is perpetuated in the divorce. So however people were operating, talking to each other, communicating or not communicating about financial issues, that has a way of going forward in the divorce. It's important for people to try to rethink how they talk about money between each other. Sometimes one person has to give up knowing everything or being in charge. They don't always do it for a mean purpose. It's just that they feel like they know. So sometimes they have to slow down a little bit, and the financial person or the mediator or the attorney has to help the other person understand and catch up. Because when there's disparity in understanding and communicating facts and information, then that's when things can get really expensive. Expensive means when people are into a flight or fight. So if you want to fight, the dollars will definitely escalate. If you run away, you don't cooperate, you don't provide information, and you don't participate, that's going to be expensive. So try to do all you can to be healthy, take care of yourself, eat, sleep as much as you can, take notes, and be thoughtful, tap into the resources that are available, and then you're less likely to spend the money that you had set aside for, I don't know, a wedding, kids' education. So there's a lot of places for money to go, and instead of pitching a fight that's going to cost a lot of money. And we can't always fix the history or the things that have gone on. So if you can maybe try to think of it as a business transaction, is really what the court comes down on. Of course, there's the law, but a lot of it is financial, and it just is what it is. So try to have productive conversations with each other and use the resources that are available. So thank you for joining us this evening. That was a good decision on your part. Laura?
All right, thanks, Cinda. We'll bring the whole team aboard. Some great tips there, much appreciated, because, you know, whether or not you get to move on and thrive after divorce is knowing about what you have, what you owe, really getting a deep understanding and building a strategy and a plan. You need a team. It takes a village to get out of this alive without too many bruises and scars. It's been wonderful being with all of you this evening and for giving your time to us. And I hope you enjoyed meeting with us. We all do work independently of one another. We also all offer complimentary consultations. We put in the chat box the link to reach out to Vesta. Vesta has a concierge service. It's completely complimentary. And what Vesta does is it'll take a call and pair you up with any of the professionals that you might like to have a consultation with. Also, Vesta is a very big network. This is our Carlsbad hub, but there's dating coaches, there's financial, like recover your credit. There's lots of us here, and they've all been vetted for you. So make use of the entire tribe that's been created for your benefit, so that you can look back on your divorce and think, whew. You want to have bragging rights, because you're going to have somebody telling you, you won't believe how much I had to spend on my divorce. And you want to go, yep, not me. So again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.